Hello, everyone, and welcome to Battlefield Breakdown, Episode 2, brought to you by Turn'em Sideways. I am Blev, and I've got a lot of tournaments to talk about on this episode of the show. We've got 2 big tournaments, a third smaller tournament. I'm going to be going through all of it here on the episode today. So let us know what you think about the show. Any comments, suggestions, anything that you've got, let us know in the comments below. Leave a comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. But let's start it out and let's dive right into some tournaments here. Let's start it out here. This was RiftLab Trial number 1. As you can see, the top 8 here. Very different than we saw in the Riftbound Meta Weekly last week. We see Sett in first, followed by Darius, Master Yi, Volibear, another Sett, and then 3 more Master Yis to round it out. This was an amazing event. Full disclosure, I got to cast the top 8 with Anzi. Casanova was casting with Marshall, aka Riftbound Report, and we had T-Mac and Silent Night casting rounds as well. An amazing production. We streamed a lot of the B matches on the Turn'em Sideways YouTube channel, so it was a really awesome event to be a part of and a really awesome event to see. But let's take a look at that first place Sett list by Vendorty. I got to cast quite a bit of Vendorty in the top cut here. A Sett brawler list. As you can see, 3x copies of Sett brawler was really the focal point of this deck. Really was built around getting not even just one, but multiple copies of Sett brawler out, using him to take over battlefields with his just absolutely really kind of the highest regularly played, really able to win basically any combat, especially when you factor in Call to Glory and all of the other buffs. Sett brawler was really able to dominate the board on top of all of the other amazing orange body spells. Kiana, obviously a very big player here. Pit Pookie, Cytherea, all very, very strong cards. And Sabotage, I'm eating my words on Sabotage. I'm a Sabotage believer now, and I think it's really going to be a staple, even in the main deck. I know from Magic, Duress, not really a main deckable card in Riftbound. It's got quite a few targets anyway, but even just seeing your opponent's hand and knowing that the coast is clear is worth the price of admission for Sabotage here. So a couple of things that are really notable about this deck: no copies of Snapvine, which, spoiler alert, was the most played single card of the entire event. No copies of Call the Weak, which is another very, very powerful removal spell. Vendorty really took a different approach to this Sett list, and it ended up paying off, as we saw in this event. Definitely urge you to check out the VODs on the Turn'em Sideways and RiftLab YouTube channel if you want to check those matches out. Let's move on to the deck that it beat in the finals. That is Prismat's Hand of Noxus. Darius here. This is Angie Pod. Again, we talked extensively about the Angie Pod deck on last week's episode. You can check that out right here on the YouTube channel. Baited Hook, able to not only give you a lot of value and persist throughout the game, it allows you to have some of the highest explosive early game turns via Vanguard Captain and Spectral Matron. It also allows you to effectively retreat your units and recall your units rather, and upgrade them by using the baited hook on units that are at a battlefield. And then the baited hook unit, you don't have to replay at the same location. So really allows you to get a lot of value. Very, very strong here, and a very strong performance by Darius here. Let's move on to one of the 4 Master Yis that we saw in this event. This is Kavira's list. stock and standard list. We do see a couple of interesting cards here. Sunlit Guardian being one that we don't always see. And then the White Flame Protector is a card that a lot of people in the community, myself included, sort of wrote off as this is a Timmy card. If you come from Magic, Timmy wants to play the big creature, wants to play the big unit. Oh, it's a dragon. Okay, cool. That'll be fun for newer players and collectors. Well, it seems like the White Flame Protector is turning out to be a very playable card. It is on rate, a very strong, powerful unit that you can play, and also just make something else just as big, which turns out to be what you need to do in order to win matches of Riftbound as well. So really powerful list here, as we've seen with the Master Yi right there. But to round out the top 4, we have got Volibear. The resurgence of Volibear in this event, and also this week in various events, has been seen here. Was an early contender for strongest deck before all of the cards were released. Sort of calmed down, settled. I think people moved off of it. The first time people lost with Volibear, they moved off of it, but now we're seeing it back again. We're seeing a bit more optimized lists. See the full complement of Sky Splitters. We're actually seeing the Dazzling Auroras in the sideboard here, which I think is certainly not the most common usage of them. But this is what I would consider a relatively stock standard Volibear list, with the exception of the Dazzling Auroras being in the sideboard. We saw this deck perform very well at the tournament, with the exception against Sett in the finals, where it really, the aggression and tempo of that Sett deck really showed the weakness of the Volley ramp deck in not having early plays. The Sett deck just takes over, and oh, by the way, Sett Brawler is as big as all of your giant units. Did not end up working out, but Volibear did have a very good performance in this top 8, as we saw here. All right, we've got the second Sett list in the top 8 here. A bit of a different build. It won't go too deep into it, but the Carnivore Snapvines are in the deck. We've definitely saw every other body deck running the full complement of Snapvines, with the exception of the first place Sett deck. And the Hidden Blades in the sideboard were a standard inclusion in the order decks here. Another interesting card in this deck was the Leona. We saw it come out in the mirror match and was quite effective, really sort of threw off the combat math. As you can imagine, the Sett mirror is all about building up these big boards and lining up attacks to try to take them down. Leona really throws a wrench into the standard combat math of the Sett mirror. So I could definitely see either version of the deck being the go-to. And one other thing that I thought was absolutely genius about this build, whether the Tog, who was the player, was on the going first or second, they would swap out which Sett they were using, so that on turn 2 they could always have access to Sett. So if they were going first and on turn 2 they would have 4 runes, they're running yellow Sett. If they were going second and on turn 2 they would have 5 runes, they're running Brawler. So really quite genius play in my mind. Thought that was just some of the most innovative, one of the more innovative things that I've seen in deck building and in best of 3 deck changes, where it's like, oh, you're swapping just so that you always got that turn 2 play. Really loved seeing that. And then we'll quickly breeze through the last 3 decks of the top 8, because yes, they are Master Yi decks. We're still seeing the White Flame Protectors, the Snapvines, Kiana, all very standard here. We did see the 2 White Flame Protectors as well. Paka Cub is a card that we've seen show up a little bit in main decks and sideboards. Just having access to a pseudo free unit by being able to hide it is something that allows the Master Yi deck to get ahead on board, even though you don't necessarily want to have multiple units at a battlefield for Master Yi. Still a very strong unit to be playing. Let's take a look at deck number 7 here, a 7th place deck. And here we're seeing, again, relatively standard here. A lot fewer variety of cards. We're seeing a lot more 3-ofs. We're seeing the 3 Blitzcranks, 3 Misfortune Captain, the orange Misfortune here. So a little bit of a different variety of Master Yi deck, even though we're seeing 4 copies of the deck in the top 8. It's not like other TCGs where every single deck is stock standard and 73 of the 75 cards are the same. We're seeing a very different build of Master Yi here in 7th place. And rounding out the top 8 is that last Master Yi deck here. Again, the full complement of White Flame Protectors. We're seeing the Zanya's Hourglass. Primal Strength is a card that, again, when I first saw it, I'm like, oh, well, I'm going to really hate opening this rare out of my booster packs. This is just a pump spell. Okay, great. But actually seeing play, and I think is a key card in these very unit-focused, might-focused decks here that we're seeing in the early days of Riftbound here. So that was RiftLab Trials #1. Again, a really amazing tournament to be a part of. Got to cast the top 8, and yes, it was. The event ended at 5 a.m. my time, so if you're like, wow, you really seemed like it was really dark and you were really tired during that cast, well, that's because it was. A couple of things I want to talk about just to wrap up this tournament. I talked about a lot of them already, but the biggest one is that the meta, every week so far, the meta has not been solved. Last week, you watched episode 1 of Battlefield Breakdown. We saw nothing but blue cards, all mined everywhere. Your Ravenbloom students, your Sprite mothers. There were zero mined decks in the top 8 of this event. And actually, I believe we've got stats. So let's take a look at the stats breakdown of this event. Yeah, there is 0 mined in the top 8. So no Victors, no Kaisas. I mean, no Teemos, though. Spoiler alert for the next tournament we're going to be covering. That's not the case. Carnivorous Snapvine, the most played card in the entire event, followed by First Mate, then Kiana, then Pit Pookie. We can see the battlefield breakdown of the top 4 most played battlefields in the event as well. The Dreaming Tree, Grove of the God Willow, Monastery of Harana, and the Star-Tipped Peak. One thing I will say about battlefields is that we definitely are still seeing a wide variety of battlefield slots being used, even across the same champion and legend. The data is not out. We have not come to a consensus on, this champion definitely wants to use these 3 battlefields. Some of them are locked into one, maybe heavily favor a second one. And then the third slot is pretty much a crapshoot no matter what. I've been following basically every tournament that has happened since the beginning of Riftbound, and there has not been consistency in that. And I think that's a beautiful thing. The meta is ever evolving week to week. And as we'll see, it's evolving day to day as well, literally. Body, 7 decks, 7 of the top 8 decks running body in their list. 3 decks having Order, 2 having Angie, aka Fury, 4 Calm, and then 0 Chaos and 0 Mind. Teemo completely eliminated from this event. No Chaos or Mind, but also no Kaisa and no Viktor, which is definitely a surprise having come into this 128 player event. You would have expected some to make the top 8, especially because Kaisa was the most represented deck in the field and then just did not convert into the top 8, though. One caveat there, because there's going to be someone in the chat furiously typing, well, actually, there was a Kaisa that 7-0'd and then dropped. That is true. There was a Kaisa that 7-0'd the Swiss and then dropped because it was infinity o'clock at night. And all I have to say to that is you just need to be a psycho and play the event till 5 in the morning, just like at least one of the casters did. But that was RiftLab Trials #1. Very excited to see what they've got cooked up for #2. But that was not the only event that happened this week. We also, of course, had our Riftbound Meta Weekly here. A little bit different than the Riftbound Meta Weeklies have been going. If you're unaware, the Riftbound Meta Weeklies before this week were just X rounds of Swiss, and then look at the standings. That's the top 8, and there's a tournament we've got. And this is the first time that the Riftbound Meta Weekly has actually done the proper top cut. This was a 2-day event, actually the cut to top 16, and then actually played out a proper playoff for top 8. So in the top 8, we had Kai'Sa, Yi, Viktor, Kai'Sa, Viktor, Teemo, Kai'Sa, and Misfortune. So couple of things here. Teemo's first top 8, Misfortune's first top 8 in a major event of over 100 players. Viktor is back, Kai'Sa is back, and only one Yi. So even literally a day later, we see a completely different meta from a tournament that had literally many of the same players as the RiftLab Trial. So very interesting to see that meta develop. Let's take a look at the first place deck from this event. That was Viktor. Very standard list that we've been seeing from the beginning of Riftbound before all the cards were even released here. We're seeing good old RBS, Ravenbloom Student as a mainstay here, Hidden Blades, Sprite Mother, all the stuff that we're used to. I will point out, as is not a secret at all, but Thousand-Tailed Watcher is the premier finisher. In Mind, it is certainly one of the best finishers in the entire game. Not only is it a 7 might accelerate unit, it's effectively much bigger than that, and also makes your board much bigger. It is basically, if you're coming from Magic, it is the Craterhoof Behemoth of Riftbound right now, and it's randomly in blue, and I'm here for it, and it's going to be very good for a very long time here. But very stock standard list. Viktor able to just have the early aggression and board control via the tokens and the board presence, but also as the late game down too, because if your opponent falls behind and takes time off, they're just able to keep building that board pressure and also interact via the spells that Mind has access to. So very strong list here in Viktor as we see it take down the event. Let's take a look at second place here. The Master Yi, again, very similar to some of the other lists that we've seen in the other event. White Flame Protector is here to stay. Carnivorous Snapvine, of course, one of the better units in the entire game. Blitzcrank making an appearance in the sideboard as well. And Kiana, an early front runner for one of the best champions in the game as well. Let's take a look at deck number 3 here. This is Prismat, someone I've known from Legends of Runeterra for a long time. And yes, this is the same prismaticism that was in the finals of the RiftLab Trials #1. So back-to-back top cut performances here. And this is with the dazzling Aurora Misfortune. Very, very strong deck. A different take on the dazzling Aurora. I think it has a lot of game that Volibear doesn't necessarily have with the Dazzling Aurora package. Mind Splitter being one of the better units in the entire game if you can get it out, which of course you can for free with Dazzling Aurora. Allows you to take you get to see your opponent's hand, which, as I mentioned before, with Sabotage is just a valuable thing to do. Also allows you to just get rid of a spell or really any card in your opponent's hand. You get to see if the coast is clear, and also you get to take a card out of their hand to make sure that the coast becomes more clear than it was. And with Misfortune versus Volibear, you get access to a lot of the really strong purple cards like Stack Deck and Gust, as well as a 1 Invert Timelines, which is really strong. You can really punish your opponent if they have too many cards in hand. You can also refill your hand as well. And it's got the added synergy with Soul Gorger, where you can discard some of your bigger units and then get them back with the Soul Gorger. Another key card here for Misfortune is that Bullet Time, which really is a card that is going to allow the Misfortune deck to sort of take any battlefield in the late game if they want it or need it, which is exactly what this deck wants to do. It also allows you to sort of reset the board if you fall behind, which these ramp decks tend to do. I do think that this Misfortune deck may be the go-to Dazzling Aurora shell versus the Volibear, even though I think a lot of people are going to lean towards Volibear initially. I think once players get more reps with this Misfortune build, we're going to be seeing a lot more of this and a lot less Volibear. 5th through 8th deck here. This is another Kai'Sa list. Again, almost card for card to Vendordi, so not much to point out here. But, you know, as we can see, literally a day later, Kai'Sa comes back in force. Viktor wins the tournament, and the meta has shifted literally one day later. Let's take a look at the next deck here. It is another Viktor. Again, very sort of standard list here. I will point out the Consult the Past is a card that is still up in the air. I think it's been a bit player preference as to whether players want to use the Consult the Past. We've seen it a lot if the deck is running a blue Viktor. Consult the Past is sort of a natural inclusion there. But I do think that depending on the meta, it is one of the first cards to get cut, as spending your literal resources and also the resource of time just drawing cards is going to cause you to fall behind in tempo. Can really be punished by certain decks in the format like Sett, Master Yi, and other board focused decks. Let's take a look at the next deck here. It's Teemo. Yes. All right. Yep. Pause the video, take your screenshot. There it is. There's the Teemo for you. I've already seen many people posting about how they are going to be building this deck. They're going to be building a Teemo list. This is certainly a very good start to it. Now, Consult the Past makes a lot more sense in the Teemo deck, as you're able to get a lot more value. And of course, the hidden theme is really what you're looking to do in Teemo. We've got the full complement of Nocturne. So, we're doing the Teemo thing. We are revealing hidden cards, we're revealing cards from your deck. We're putting Nocturnes into play. We have the Thousand-Tailed Watchers to end the game. We've got all of the amazing purple spells as well, like Fight or Flight and Gust and Stack Deck. Just a lot of really, really strong synergistic cards. And I think there's still room to tighten up the list a bit. I think there is room to cut a few cards and add more specific meta focus cards to the Teemo list. But all in all, this deck is very powerful and is certainly a contender in the meta, even if it's not necessarily a tier 1 deck. I think it certainly could be with proper piloting. It certainly is a deck that as we see here, can put up results. And if you are a diehard Teemo main and want to make it work, well, you just might be able to. Let's take a look at the next deck here. It is another Kai'Sa. Biggest difference with this version is we're seeing a Pouty Poro, just as another access to another 2-drop in the deck. And we've got main deck Icathian Rain, which is a card that we've seen everything from some main deck copies to not at all in the list. I think mostly it comes in from the sideboard. It is a very powerful card that does get countered by a few spells in the game and also is very bad against deflect, but it is a sort of over-the-top spell that allows you to come back if you fall behind on board. Let's see the next deck here in our top 8 of the Riftbound Meta Weekly, which of course was this one, because I can count. I certainly can't, but that's why I have an amazing producer here to tell me that I am dum-dum. So couple of last thoughts on the Riftbound Meta Weekly from this week. Where did Sett go? We saw Sett literally win the event the day before. Goes into the next day. We play a tournament. There's not a single Sett in the top 8. Literally, the meta is evolving from tournament to tournament. I don't recall seeing a game that had meta diversity like this for this long, which, I've been covering the game since the very first tournaments, the Max Tapera Open tournament, from the very first week that we saw enough cards to build decks from. So we've seen a lot of changes back and forth, week to week, literally day to day, which is really cool and really fun. I'm not naive enough to think that once we start seeing high stakes, high level events, that it's going to stay this diverse and be this sort of nebulous and changing. But I have hope that it will be more flexible than other card games, because it certainly seemed like that, more so than other card games that I've been a part of at early days like this. And also, what's really cool, even besides seeing, Kaisa dominate one event, then Sett, then Viktor, then Volley. But even more cool than that is seeing the emergence of Misfortune and Teemo and Volley Bear and other sort of more fringe decks. There was actually a Leona in the top 16 that lost to the Misfortune deck. So there could have easily have been a Leona in top 8, which we've not seen at all. So really cool to see not only meta diversity from tournament to tournament, deck diversity within those tournaments, and also deck diversity from decks that are the same champion. Like we're seeing very different builds of Sett, very different builds of Kaisa. We're seeing all sorts of different cards and different builds being played. Again, I think as the stakes get higher and more tournaments get played, that's going to sort of whittle down more, but it is way more broad than I would have expected after 4 or 5 weeks that we have seen a sort of competitive Riftbound. So very, very interesting and very, very cool place to be at the beginning of Riftbound here. So last thing I wanted to quickly talk about was there was one other event. This was the Riftbound France Open Cup. This was just an event that was run by the French Riftbound Discord. Here is the top 8. Now, I will note, I found out after the fact, there were only 16 players in this event, so take these results with a grain of salt. But in first place, we had Master Yi. Then in second and third place, we had Volley Bear. Fourth place was Teemo. Fifth place was Sett. Sixth place was a third Volley Bear. Seventh place was Kaisa, and eighth place was Viktor. When I originally saw these results, I was so pumped to be like, okay, well, all bets are off, because we saw Sett dominate one day, we saw Kaisa dominate another day, and we saw Volley Bear dominate a third day. Now, I kind of have to throw out the results of this event in terms of stats relevancy, but it is cool to see players experimenting with other builds. It's not just to draw the parallel. We're seeing the Magic the Gathering Arena Championship happen, and it's 60% or something like that of one deck and one archetype. And within that one deck and archetype, the variance between builds is very, very small, like handfuls of cards at most, and usually they're sideboard cards. So this is even if the meta does eventually get to a more settled place, just remember, as someone who's taking place in these tournaments or covering these tournaments, or even just watching the Battlefield Breakdown here, take a moment to take it in, because it's a really fun and cool time to be here and a part of Riftbound. But that was a whole heck of a lot of tournaments to talk about. I'm super excited to have been a part of one of them and to keep covering those events. If you liked what you saw here, leave a comment and subscribe to the Tournament Sideways channel. We are going to be doing cool giveaway stuff for subscribers of the channel. We also have other awesome shows on the channel, like The Winning Point, which features myself, Casanova, Charmer, and Pastry Time. So you should definitely check that out as well. And the best way to do that is to subscribe to the channel. Again, if you have any feedback or comments, let me know in the comments below. But that has been Battlefield Breakdown. I am Blevins, and we'll see you on the next one.